Good evening, people. This is Dr. X Key Score. This is video 18 regarding the program. The Department of Justice, FBI, and Homeland Security Extrajudicial Political Targeting Protocol. I have some very interesting and also a little bit disturbing updates tonight. Last week I submitted a 20-page affidavit to the Director of National Intelligence, Office of the Inspector General. Of course, all of my communications are monitored, emails, phone calls. So FBI and Homeland Security are well aware of what was submitted to the Director of National Intelligence. As a result, this weekend, the overt surveillance greatly increased by, I'm going to say, at least tenfold, as did Homeland Security's neuro-linguistic programming protocol, utilizing the battle swarming of like vehicles and similarly colored vehicles as well, in addition to being assaulted twice. So what I'm going to do is give you guys some information about myself, which I've not released to the public. Pretty heavy stuff. In the early 2000s, I moved to South America. I enjoy remote locales, remote locations, different cultures, different languages, different foods. That's always been in my nature. Within a few weeks of arriving, somebody came up to me and said, "You got to get out of here." I was like, "Why?" And they're like, "The FBI's here. They're going to kill you. They don't like you." It sounded absurd. I attributed it to xenophobia. I just simply felt that they didn't want me there and were coming up with something that was, off the wall to scare me out of the country. And before I left the United States for South America, a number of things happened to me, but I was not aware of the extent of the tyranny the FBI and Homeland Security were already engaging in. I just thought it was bad luck, coincidence. But in any case, when I got to South America, this lady warned me off. She's like, "You gotta go. You gotta go. You're gonna have a problem." A few months later, I had purchased a few pieces of property in a really rural locale. Where I lived was and still is like the Wild West. Everybody has a firearm. I didn't. My security guard did. I bought a pretty nice piece of property, put in 25 or 30 different types of fruit trees. I was like living my dream. And all of a sudden I started to experience vandalism at the property. Home invasions, no sign of forced entry, and all kinds of petty harassment. I still hadn't put anything together yet. I went out one night to a local restaurant, had a few beers, had some of the great local food. I miss that place with all of my heart. When I got home, the alarm for my house and for, what would you say, the small ranch house that I had in that location was going off. Somebody had thrown a huge stick through the electric fence, which was on top of the wall, because in these locations, because in these locations you need a secure barrier, despite what Nancy Pelosi says, to live. So I had a 3-meter wall around the entire property, plus an electric fence on top of that. And somebody drove by at like 9 or 10 o'clock at night, got out of the car and took tree branches or other debris and snapped the electric circuitry which was mounted on top of the wall. My security guard was definitely scared, even though he was armed. The next day he told me that he knew who did it and we should go to talk to him. So I was like, of course, absolutely. We went to the guy's house, this area was similar to West Virginia, someplace really rural. West Texas, and you can have a house, every mile or 2 miles. You just don't see a lot of people there. It's the outback. It was the bush. I love the bush. Love the wildlife, love these remote locations. I'm born for that. I was born for that. That's my environment. That's my hostile environment. I'm good at those places. So we drive up to this guy's house. I believe there was somebody working in a field next door. My security guard, who absolutely loves alcohol, gets out of the vehicle, gives a war whoop, and then fires a shotgun into the air 3 times. No one was hurt. We didn't see anyone in the home. No issues. The guy working in the field laughed. He had a shotgun propped up against the fence. Everyone there carried a firearm. I had no idea my employee was going to do that. We left. 2 days later, I was at a small sidewalk cafe and was taken down by 20 to 25 people in full tactical gear. They were domestic military units of that country's police. My small 5-pound Maltese, my best friend, was with me. She luckily was not hurt, and after the incident I was able to get her back. That was one of the main forces which motivated me to survive through what I'm going to relay to you people, because it's pretty friggin' heinous. So the next thing I know, I'm hogtied, thrown into the back of a SUV. And I mean really hogtied, physically abused, hit, punched, kicked. They kicked the shit out of me. At that point in time, I was in great shape, totally jacked. Definitely a physical force to be reckoned with at that point in time. But when you got 20, 25 people rolling in with SWAT gear and taking you down like that, fully automatic weapons. I mean, I didn't even know what hit me. There was no time to respond, and even if I had known what was coming, I wouldn't have responded, because the results were unquestionable. They had one thing on their mind. And it wasn't the continuation of my life for, until I'm a happy senior citizen. These people were serious. They were deadly. They were dangerous. And this is in a third world country, in a part of the third world country that, makes our rural areas look like a walk in the park. The next thing I know, I'm taken to a little county type jail. I'm there for a day or two. I have connections in this country, or had connections in the country, so I was able to get some lawyers in. Gave them money. The thing is the FBI was interfacing with these attorneys already and either coercing them or scaring them off. So the attorneys disappeared. Two days later, no shower, no bathroom, very little food. I'm removed from that facility, and there was a lynch mob in the street. I didn't understand what was going on. And I'll relay that in a little bit. The next thing I know, I'm in a procession, a parade of law enforcement vehicles driving at a high rate of speed. And I wasn't hogtied, but they cuffed me down tight. And the primary guard or military personnel was like 2'4", 2'5", 260. Forehead like Cro-Magnon man. Tough dude, man. Tough dude. And you know what? He was the one that walked me into the maximum security prison 20 minutes later. I don't think he was a bad guy. There's a lot of corruption in these countries. Yeah, he was probably corrupt, but he wasn't an overly malicious individual, and I'm thankful for that. And, my heart goes out to him. He could have been worse. So the next thing I know, I'm in this maximum security prison. They strip me naked and immediately throw me into solitary confinement in a room that was like 6 by 6 by 6. No lights, no running water, no toilet. I had a bucket. They gave me a bucket and toothpaste like it was a joke. The bugs were so bad that what I did was smear the mint toothpaste on my body so I would stop getting bitten. The next thing I know, after like a day or 2 days, I don't know how long it was, they open the door and they stick in another person with me. Oh, and by the way, before I get to that, my breathing space was a hole in the wall the size of a tennis ball. There was a pipe running vertically from floor to ceiling in one corner of the room. So what I did was, there was a piece of debris or a cinder block which was in the corner. I utilized that to break the pipe, to puncture it, and that was what gave me my water for a few days. So the door opens. Obviously, I've been exposed to extreme sensory deprivation for at least 2 or 3 days, and they throw in this other guy. And it was basically supposed to be set up to be like a cage fight in the dark. As soon as the guy comes in, like within a few minutes, and I speak that language fluently. So the guy comes in and he's like, he instantly starts like talking about gay people and gay sex. Now remember, I'm in a maximum security prison. I've been in solitary confinement. I've already lost a few pounds. And I'm thrown, or rather this animal was thrown into the dark with me. His name was Edson. Or Eduardo. And Eduardo had like a very unique way of killing people. He was a serial killer. He maintained he hated gay people, but would only have sex with them. He didn't like women. And what Eduardo would do is cut a slit in his male victims' stomachs and have intercourse with them as they were dying through the laceration that he created. I didn't know this at the time. All I knew was I had some strange dude locked in with me. And he began talking some really strange shit when he got in there. And I told him I'm not going to go into details of what I said. However, I let him know in no uncertain terms that if he approached me or got close to me, that the consequences for him would be lethal. And man, the guy started pounding on the door. He wanted to get out of there really quick. Despite his history of killing, 4, 5, 6 people via the prior means I just relayed, which are kind of grotesque, but not kind of grotesque, very grotesque, but in any case, 3 days later, I get out of solitary confinement, or 2 days later. I go before a judge. I don't even know what's going on. I go before a judge, and remember, no one was hurt during the incident. We didn't even see anybody there. And all of a sudden, like, on the prison floor, it's like, oh, you tried to kill 3 people? It's like, what? I was stunned. I was stunned. The media came in to interview me. One of the female reporters started to cry. She said, you don't belong here. They're going to kill you. But remember, you're kind of in this situation, you're just in shock. So your cognitive ability has been diminished by the sensory deprivation and by the trauma that you've been suddenly introduced to. I had no idea what was going on. There's like 3, 4, 5 different charges, and I'm thinking, really? Everybody where I live carries a friggin' gun. People shot small game, fired off in the air. It was really like the Wild West there. Even for that country, the locals saw it as kind of like a West Virginia type of a place to us, like super rural without a lot of money. And in any case, there's like 3 or 4 accusations leveled against me, including like triple attempted homicide or something ridiculous. The judge reviewed the case. He's like, this is bullshit. And he's like, there's no signs that this individual is a terrorist. And then all of a sudden, this is in a, different language. All of a sudden, my head comes up. What had happened is this. The FBI already had a few weird experiences in the United States before I left. Didn't put 2 and 2 together. Had no realization that the FBI was so corrupt. Those motherfuckers followed me to South America. The lady who warned me off was right. I wasn't involved in criminal activity before I left the United States, and I've certainly had, as a man from a strong Christian background, with a devout faith in God, I've never been in a mosque in my life. I've never had any contacts with anyone that could be construed, misconstrued, or twisted to make it look like I've ever harbored the intention to hurt one of my fellow countrymen or my country, or anything that fits the bill of terrorism. Nothing even remotely. And hey, FBI, when was it? 2014, 2015? How many times did I go into your field office and offer to take a polygraph with no lawyers present for any questions you had to ask me? And you people were furious. The rage in your faces that I would dare walk into your field office to state that I'm fucking innocent and to back the fuck off and to give me a polygraph and be over with it pisses me off to this day. You're not interested in keeping the peace. You people are interested in taking out anyone who you don't like and who won't hop along with the narrative you create for them. In any case, the FBI had rolled into this country and identified me as an Al-Qaeda contact. No shit. This is in the papers. In that area. Oh, the other thing is that they contacted individuals I knew in the United States and said, Dr. X, and I wasn't a doctor then, did not have that level of education yet, was involved in a shootout with the local police. And you know what? They perpetuate that narrative until today, when I've gone abroad to live in other countries as well. Which means that when I've lived in Africa, that they were utilizing, unbeknownst to me, the disinformation package that they created for me in South America. It's very, very disturbing that our peacekeepers and supposed protectors would engage in something like this. I had already studied under military personnel for my baccalaureate degree, Middle Eastern Studies, specializing in counter. So I didn't know this video was going to run this long, and just for ease of use, I did it on my iPhone, so I'm only allowed a half an hour a pop. So it ran out. Time ran out. So let me see if I can pick up in the right place. So basically my baccalaureate degree was under retired military personnel focusing on Middle Eastern studies and counterterrorism. My master's degrees and my PhD were also under three-letter agency people and a now retired high-ranking general who also was involved in intelligence operations. My focus for my two master's degrees, for my PhD: intelligence, counterintelligence, terrorism, counterterrorism, security studies, and Chinese military operations. All at a university here in the United States. All solid professors and great people. It was an honor to study under them. I'm honored to have had that opportunity. But at that point in time, when I was in South America, I'd only had a bachelor's degree. Once again, I've never been in a mosque in my life. Never once thought of converting to Islam, and certainly never engaged in any activities whatsoever for which I could be labeled a terrorist. But what people need to understand is that if FBI, Homeland Security, whoever doesn't like you, if you protested Shamu the killer whale at SeaWorld in 2001, you're a domestic terrorist. Oh, you're Occupy Wall Street or Black Lives Matter? Guess what? When you travel abroad, they're going to tell foreign governments, that you're a domestic terrorist. You don't get a day in court. Now imagine that you're in a third world country where the average individual is making $1,000 or $2,000 a year. FBI and their private contractors roll in taxpayer money. They can pay for anything they want. Can have somebody whacked out in one of these places for $100 or $200. What do you think corrupt local law enforcement is going to do to help the FBI? What do you think the FBI is going to tell these individuals? And what they do, as I've mentioned in a lot of my tweets, is tailor the narrative to fit the information recipients. You're living next door to a green person, you are a green racist. If he or she has a pet turtle, you've got a turtle fetish, and you hate green people, so they better, watch their turtle closely when you're around. That's the kind of shit they pull. Desperate. They're so desperate to create a target when there isn't one. They're not out catching bad guys. They're fucking with innocent people. And their fuckery followed me to South America and followed me to Africa. And every single country I went to, they snowballed the disinformation, making it more dangerous for me to travel and live abroad. And I didn't realize any of this until the past few years, since this heinous domestic and political targeting program has come to light. So let me get back to South America. I'm up in front of a judge. And the judge is like, he disputed all the charges that were leveled against me. He's like, this is bullshit. This guy's not guilty of any of this. He hasn't been engaged in criminal activity here. There's no substantial proof or anything. Al-Qaeda? Terrorism? Release him. Habeas corpus. Immediately issued a habeas corpus. The attorney that I had, having pulled out of solitary confinement, buck naked, I was frog marched to an area, and he had me sign a contract for my representation. And it was written in a language other than English, which I can fluently read and write, but it's not my first language. And once again, no food, very little water, inhumane conditions. And by the way, in that country, they went into that prison and filmed those solitary confinement facilities, or those rooms. You can't even call them that, dungeons. And they were closed down. And they said these are some of the most terrible conditions we've ever seen in our country. And this is a third world country saying this. So anyways, I'm frog marched into this conference room across from a lawyer, and it was basically like a phone booth with a cage, so nothing can be passed through. So I signed this contract, but what I didn't realize was not only was it a contract for my legal representation, but it gave the attorney the full rights to my property should anything happen to me. And of course he wrote the contract. Well, basically what happened was they released me into the general prison population, and the attorney, who was already interfacing with a corrupt FBI personnel, had a hit put out on me. And even worse, the director of the prison was his best friend from law school. It's a very bad situation. A very, very bad situation. It gets worse. The attorney who was already interfacing with the FBI fled with a habeas corpus. So even though the judge said, listen, nobody's been hurt, the guy didn't discharge the weapon, it was his employee, he's certainly not a terrorist, he has to be released. So despite the judge himself stating that all the charges were bogus and I should be immediately released, the attorney fled with the habeas corpus, the release order. Hey, FBI, thanks. You're not engaged in protecting our country. You're out whacking patriots like me. Which is why I've decided to make this video. So the battery ran low and I had to do a recharge, so I'm sorry if this video lacks a little bit more continuity than the other ones that I've made. I know it's certainly a heck of a lot longer than the other ones I've made. So basically, not basically, so really, the FBI triggered my proxy detention in a foreign country. And when the judge dropped the charges and demanded my release, they then increased their interface with my attorney. The attorney fled with the habeas corpus, now is returned to the prison, and then put into the general population, and set free to fend for myself. Gets worse. Just like in the United States, the Zersetzung, the depersonifying of an individual, the terrible slander. So, in any prison system, there's a pecking order, and there's certain people that they go after and they target. So that means they're going to label you, if they, especially if they want to take you out, a rapist or a child molester. That's the quickest way to get somebody whacked. So what do you think happened? And what do you think the response was? Was in there for a little bit less than 5 weeks. I lost a pound a day or more. Rarely slept. And all of the attorneys, just like here in the United States, get chased away. The FBI will create legal problems for you, and then when you try and retain an attorney, they chase them away. Hopefully after you've given them a retainer. That's one of their MOs. That's how the FBI operates. Create a legal situation for an individual, blow things totally out of proportion, create a false scenario, and then when the individual who's innocent tries to pursue a legal resolution, interfere with that, fuck them, and try and take them down. It's perpetual. These guys do this in perpetuity. They're engaged in terrorism. This is terrorism. This is political targeting. So back to my situation. About a week and a half or 2 weeks in, out of the nearly 5-week stint, there was a prison riot. SWAT teams entered, military police entered. Half of the place burned down. There were dead bodies piled up. Pretty intense. And in these prisons, I mean, this is the only one I've ever been in, thank God. In these prisons, in this prison, the gangs or groups or organized criminal cartels were separated into sections. So the section that I was in was like on the other side of a wall from a different criminal cartel. So as the riot was going on, they were trying to tunnel through the wall with improvised tools to enter our area. And if you're targeted by the federal government, by the FBI, by the private security contractors, Homeland Security, JTTF, InfraGard, all of a sudden, the bizarre and hurtful coincidences in your life, you realize they aren't coincidences. So, as the riot is gearing up, the people from the other cartel on the other side, or another gang, were trying to come through the wall. And in a third world country, the construction of these facilities is pretty haphazard. So getting through a wall is not necessarily that difficult. On my side, the first few days I had somebody steal something from me and put the fear of God into him enough that other people realized that if they were going to take me down, that it was going to have to be covertly, and if it wasn't covertly, they were going to go down with me or get really hurt or worse. And having had to be in a physical altercation for many, many years, the sign of true power, I believe, is being so powerful that you can avoid altercations. At that point in time, I was in excellent shape, certainly knew how to handle myself, and looked pretty damn badass. So the combination of those things was kind of like a protective shield or aura, as obviously was Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit and God, protection over me in that bad situation. So that's how I kind of like maintained my safety on my side of the wall with the cartel that I was thrown in. But the whack job that they threw in with me in solitary confinement was also in my wing. We had one or two almost run-ins, but I was also able enough to project what would happen if he engaged with me, that he as well left me alone. And I made friends with, a few, not friends, but you can't say friends, that's Christ. I managed to get along with just about everyone in there. In any case, so that this prison riot starts. They burned half the place down. Half the place down. I don't know, 7 or 8 people died. Never even seen anything like this in the movies. In Hollywood. Never. So over the course of the next few weeks, I'd have a string of attorneys to show up, and being a foreigner in one of these countries, you're automatically considered to be a millionaire whether you are or not. So usually you've got people running to represent you, but what was going on was every attorney that showed up, the FBI interfaced with, just like they do here in the United States. But there, those consequences can be lethal. Now, the Department of Defense's definition of terrorism, foreign or domestic, is any attempt to hurt, maim, or kill an individual. What was happening to me fits the definition of terrorism. At the hands of, and I say this very sarcastically, fellow Americans. You people aren't my fellows. You're out there targeting and terrorizing innocent civilians. And you know what? That's sociopathic. You're not just terrorists, you're sociopaths. You're sick individuals. You're parasitic. So after a string of like 6, 7, 8 attorneys, things were getting bad. They already dropped 25 pounds. I finally got a message out through a guard to an attorney who was able to get me out of there. Oh, and okay, well, I got to go into something else, people. State Department shows up. Now, the problem is that just like hundreds of thousands of other American citizens, once Homeland Security and FBI blacklists you, you go on federal databases as a terrorist. So don't think that you're going to get assistance from your country if you live abroad. The scorn is easily readable in the faces of these individuals when they arrive. They're convinced, because the FBI and Homeland Security have doped up the databases, they're convinced that, you're molesting the next door neighbor's turtle, the green guy, or they're convinced that you're a terrorist, or maybe they're not convinced, but whatever happens is that the FBI and Homeland Security dope that database up with so much bullshit that it would disgust the best of us, myself included. I can't even imagine what they have created for me. I can, a little bit, because I've heard feedback, but we won't go there. So the State Department person shows up. We speak for a few minutes. I was like, ma'am, I haven't done anything. I haven't done anything. I've went before a judge. The judge says I should be released. Really? So the State Department knows that the judge has a habeas corpus for me, and then I was ordered to be released, and I'm still stuck in there. Interesting. So the State Department lady gives me a piece of paper, or several pieces of paper stapled together, with a list of attorneys. And she's like, these are the State Department attorneys, or not State Department attorneys, the attorneys that have agreed to work with the American government. And when she rolled in, I was still bouncing in and out of solitary confinement. And I'm like, ma'am, I can't even make a phone call. They're not giving me access to a phone. The attorney disappeared with my habeas corpus. And then I said to her, I relayed the conditions of the situation and where I was to this woman. And her response to me is, I've seen much worse. Okay, fellow American. Thank you. Dr. X was then returned. I was then returned to the solitary confinement area at that point in time. But in any case, I know this is not super linear, and I apologize for that. I just want to make sure I get all the facts in there. So I'd say a week or so, 2 weeks after the riot, the place smelled like smoke for the rest of the time I was there. I managed to get a message out to through a security guard, through a prison guard. And he was able to come up with an attorney who represented some of the biggest names in the country to get me out of there. So the attorney finally sprung me after 35 days or so. First thing on my mind, and the primary thing on my mind, other than my personal safety, and I break up thinking about this, wasn't my personal safety, but was my little dog, who, before she was poisoned once again by the FBI, scumbags, was with me for almost 15 years. So the whole time I'm in this situation, other than my personal safety and trying to fight and survive for my life, my primary concern was my dog, who had been my global travel partner. And as I revert from speaking about her, I'll regain more of my composure, but it just brings tears to my heart. So, she survived. I was reunited with her. I'll never forget, the attorney took me to a restaurant, and I think I put on 8 or 10 pounds at one sitting. I went in to that facility at 198 pounds, shredded, ripped, awesome shape. Awesome shape to the point when I'm in these locales, people would assume I was a professional wrestler or bodybuilder or something along those lines. Competition level, you know. So I went in there at 197 and came out at 165. I lost more than a pound a day. The attorney said, he's like, I've never seen anyone eat like this in my life. We were there 2 or 3 hours. And my dog, who was sitting with me on the chair, she was like in shock. And it took a day or two for her to realize that I was back and regain her composure. The effect on her was bad. So eventually, I think I can bring us back to the United States. Eventually I got out of the country, flew out. By the way, all my property there, they arranged for its loss. They rolled people in. FBI loves to do that. Utilize your friends, your associates, people you know, level false accusations against them, cause them legal problems, and then somehow leverage the loss of their assets to fall into the hands of scumbags. Standard operating procedure. I get back to the States, worked some menial jobs. I only had a bachelor's degree at that point in time. Went for my first master's degree, and then went on to get a second master's degree in my PhD in the aforereferenced subjects, which I spoke about at the beginning of this video. So I've had to deal with a few interruptions as I've been making this video, which is normal. Inbound phone calls and emails from people and individuals that I wouldn't expect. It's part of the FBI and Homeland Security's disruption protocol. But let me try and come back to my summary of what I had to put up with. So I get back to the States, get my 2 master's degrees, begin on my PhD, and then move to Africa. And what I didn't know was, while the FBI did not apparently relay what had happened in Brazil to the African countries I lived in, because I guess they wanted to play more games and perpetuate it. It's not a intelligence or counterintelligence operation. These people, they've got some type of psychological issues, and it's a deviancy. It's a sociopathy or psychopathy. They enjoy terrorizing people. This is in their nature, at least in respect to me and how they've treated me. It's in their nature. It's like hunting a deer, you know. Do you want to do a headshot if you hunt a deer? Or do you want to, like, shoot off each foot and watch it flop around? Really? That's sick. That's sick. But that's the attitude. So, what they did in Africa was an echo of what they did in South America. Go to country A, accuse them of being a terrorist, engage in all kinds of crazy stuff, give them all of the information that's in infusion centers, your PII, personally identifiable information, your private information. My friends, if you travel abroad and they don't like you, your whole life is given to foreign governments. They don't give a shit. The FBI will be passing out your personal information like candy on Halloween, and I'm sure they'd enjoy that too, and I'm not going to go into the reasons why. But based on their deviant behavior, I guess you could make a guess. So in country A, oh, he's a terrorist, and he's this, and he's that. Then you go to country B, and what they do is they approach the government of country B, and they'll be like, you know, we're worried about him in the United States. He's a designated terrorist. And by the way, country A has him under investigation as well. Wow, FBI. You're so clever. The intentional snowballing of disinformation. So what the FBI will do is go to country B and say, hey guys, he's under investigation in the United States. And country A has him under investigation as well. And then the FBI is going to actually help country B, where the target just arrived. They're going to help them interface with country A. And for an individual like me who lived in 5 or 6 different African countries for my second master's degree and for my PhD from an American university, but you can study abroad and do research abroad, which is what I was doing. What they'll do is they start these disinformation parcels and these false narratives, and they'll be like, oh, country B, he's under investigation. In country A, let me help you interface with country A. So by the time I was in country D, living there, minding my own business, the FBI had already incited hate and anger and the potential for me to be targeted abroad by their disinformation parcels, their disinformation narratives to all these different countries, and they'll snowball it. So by the time you're in the 4th or the 5th country, they've got the first 4 that you lived in on board, all thinking that you're a bad person and you should be targeted. And by the way, the means and the methods of problem resolutions in these countries can be worse than incarceration. Somehow, again, thank God, thank Jesus, thank the Holy Spirit, thank whoever's watching over me, I got back to the United States, and the shit hit the fan here when I returned home. And I didn't put any of this stuff together until the last few years. I had no idea that we had people so vicious, evil, and corrupt working in our government. Come from a pretty well-off family. Everyone's well-educated. Everybody's had homes and a lot of assets on all sides of the family. It's a citizen elimination process. But now get this. In 2014 or 2015, I called the attorney's office in Brazil. And she's like, oh man, we're going to drop your case. This is ridiculous. The judge didn't like it. It was absurd. Everybody knows. The locals were talking about it. You were set up. Well, she said, call me back in a day or two. Let me see what I can do about this. So I did. The attorney was terrified. One of her co-workers said that she wouldn't take the case and was thinking of leaving the practice. The FBI interfaced with the security apparatus in that country and warned her off. And then, get this, people, you ready for this? No one was hurt. No one was injured. And the judge demanded that all charges be dropped. So what did the FBI do in, I would say, January or February of 2014, I believe? They cooked the books in the foreign country to make it look like several people had died during the incident. This is corruption. These people are beyond corrupt. They're engaged in a political targeting operation. And maybe I should have inserted this at the beginning of the video, and I didn't, but I can go back and address this really quickly. In the late 90s, I aggressively blew the whistle on people that were looting money at a condominium association where I owned property. And over the course of a decade, it went into 7 figures of money. So it was a lot. When I reported them to state agencies, and the state agencies didn't follow up, I reported the people who didn't follow up. Certified public accountants lost their licenses, people lost their jobs. I was a wrecking machine for the corrupt people in the state agencies which wouldn't investigate major felonies and racketeering RICO crimes. So I think that could be one of the reasons I was put on the radar, because I've never put up with shit for anyone, and I've always been very dogged about my approach, or very relentless. I don't give up, and I'm not going to give up. And that's why I'm making this video, and that's why I'm calling out the corrupt FBI. You people are corrupt. I'm so sick of your targeting. Enough. You're behaving like criminals. This isn't law enforcement. You try and destroy people, and then when they seek a legal resolution or means to resolve their problem, you go after them even harder. You're criminals. You're criminals. You're engaged in terrorism. You triggered my proxy detention abroad. And by the way, people, when you travel and you go to these remote locales, like I've always enjoyed doing for my entire life, or once I began it, they roll in and they'll use you as a war game target and show these foreign governments how to go after their dissidents or anybody that poses a threat to a corrupt regime. So the country A, B, C, and D, once again, they enjoy this. They find this fun. They're killing innocent Americans for sport. FBI almost cost me my life in South America. And they continue here in the United States to this day. It doesn't stop. My reports to the Director of National Intelligence last week, my affidavit, resulted in me being assaulted twice this weekend. Should I go to local law enforcement and try and file a police report for assault or somebody flashing a weapon at me or slicing my tires? Well, with an NIS, non-investigative subject status, once the local or state police, local law enforcement or state police, run your license, your license is going to, your driver's license or your ID, it's going to come back as a hit with special instructions, because that processing of your ID to get the background information on you is run through threat fusion centers. Threat fusion centers are doped up with the FBI's and Homeland Security's disinformation narratives. Every individual who they don't like has a compromat dossier built up on them to defame them. Everybody has two dossiers. One, which is who you really are and what you really are, and then the second one is the bogus one, like what we saw our great Donald Trump nailed with. This is going on to Donald Trump. This is going on to Kavanaugh. This is going on to Roger Stone and General Flynn. And you don't have to like their political perspective. They can be the biggest jerks in the world, but they, like everyone else, and myself included, deserve due process. But what we've got going on here, people, is now investigations run in perpetuity. That means forever, and they're meant to destroy the individual. It has nothing to do with an investigation. It has to do with depleting their lifestyle, their finances, destroying their life, destroying their reputation, destroying their family. And thank God I've lived long enough to complete my education and make this video, relaying this to people. And I rarely talk about this. I don't tell anybody this. But in the relaying of this information, and considering what I went through, I'm lucky to be alive. Who knows, what the near future is going to bring, because recently FBI, Homeland Security have gotten even more aggressive and more violent. But this has been the story of Dr. X Keyscore. You can find me on Twitter, XKeyscore1. And usually, I cut and splice videos and try and polish them off. But what I'm going to do is took me 3 or 4 different groupings or takes of this, because my iPhone, for some reason, knocks out at 30 minutes or 25 minutes. So I'm going to put these 3 or 4 videos together, which I've done over the past hour and a half, which will make one video. And hopefully my story will give others some insight regarding the level of corruption that has besieged certain groups in our government at this point. I can't think of any other reason to trigger someone's proxy detention, to levy such horrible allegations against them, other than to kill them. That's a death sentence. Really, FBI? Really, Homeland Security? Is that what you people have devolved to? Or maybe you haven't devolved. Maybe that's just what you've always been, and now it's coming to light. In any case, people, this is Dr. X Key Score. Cathartic video. I'm glad to relay my story. I've sat on it for more than a decade. Rarely talk about it. But God bless, and hopefully utilize my personal experiences to enlighten yourself as to the situation this country is in, because these are fellow Americans. I should say that with more sarcasm. Fellow Americans. This seems like, in addition to terrorism, it might even constitute war crimes. Who are these madmen that run around the world in all of these foreign countries to take out fellow citizens with force, threat of injury, violence? Doesn't the Department of Defense classify that as terrorism? Why are FBI personnel engaged in what the Department of Defense defines as terrorism? It's a rhetorical question. All right, I'm going to go to work on the video, people. Thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure relaying this to you. God bless all of you. This is Dr. X Key Score. Once again, you can follow me on Twitter at XKeyscore1. Thank you very much.